muted, right? No, we wouldn't be. Okay. All right. No attendees yet. Even if we start with no attendees, we have to do the webinar anyway,
I know.
in case somebody joins 10 minutes late or whatever.
Who do?
All right. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at today. Welcome to the Successful Atlassian Cloud Migration webinar. I'm David, here with Cody, and we're with Valientus. We're your hosts for today. I am, as you can see on the slide here, my name is David Mitchell. I am a consultant with Valientus. I've been with the company for about 3 years. I'm an Atlassian certified professional. Cody here is a Atlassian certified expert, which means he has gotten 4 certifications from Atlassian, which is not an easy thing to do. And we both work primarily with migrations. We have the opportunity to do other types of engagements, but as you can imagine right now, migrations are big business. With the deprecation of server, everybody's migrating. So right now, pretty much every assignment we get are migration assignments.
Pretty much.
So we are part of Valientus's cloud migration team, and we are here to talk to you about migrating to cloud today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Cody for the next slide. He's going to do some housekeeping and make some announcements before we get started.
Yeah. Sorry, let me populate this. So we will be hosting a cloud migration workshop on February 15th. You can look for that between 12 and 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. During that, we really try to do a ramped up version of this webinar. So we're going to go into much more detail, the different topics that we're going to kind of go through today. Hopefully this webinar today will give you kind of a good understanding of what to expect. That workshop allows for a lot more interaction, questions, more in-depth analysis of the different points that we're going to cover here. So if you do have more curiosity, more questions that you're looking for, want to do some more learning on maybe your upcoming cloud migration with Atlassian, please feel free to register for that workshop. There will be a link for that towards the end of this webinar that we do, where you can go and register online for that. So with that said, obviously this is still, we're trying to get as much in about an hour's length time as we can. I do encourage everyone, if you have questions, please post it in the Q&A within your browser there, so that way we can try to answer those as we're moving along. We'll do our best to cover all of those as we move throughout the entire webinar. So I will turn it back over to David here, and we're going to get started with the cloud migration roadmap.
Thanks, Cody. What we want to do here is introduce you to the cloud migration roadmap. This is actually Atlassian's cloud migration roadmap. We get this from them. There are these 6 phases: assess, plan, prep, test, migrate, and launch. Depending on these are basically the phases that you will go through from beginning to end. And depending on the complexity of your migration, they're all different. Your migration could last anywhere from 2 to 12 months. 2 months is the shortest we've seen. I think I've actually only done one that's been 2 months, and up to a year is the longest that we've done. Most of them are, the vast majority, I would say, are between 4 to 6 months.
Yeah.
That's sort of average for, but so we're using this format of the cloud migration roadmap also as our agenda today as we walk through the key factors for a successful cloud migration. A couple of points to make note of here. One thing is, a real key thing is, when you're on this journey, start early with getting your InfoSec team involved in the conversation. With most companies, InfoSec needs to do some sort of approval, and we have actually seen situations where we've worked with a customer, we've gotten about halfway through the process, they were planning it, everything seemed to be on track, and then InfoSec got involved and said, hold up, no, we haven't approved this yet. And we have actually seen that push some timelines. So it's important to get them involved in the conversation early. And there is a whole slew of material online provided by Atlassian that you can refer your InfoSec people to that will answer all of their questions. Additionally, something to note here, as we look at these phases and these steps here on the screen, the beginning phases, the assess, the plan, and prep, are going to take longer than anything else. Testing is, relatively speaking, is shorter. Migrate is pretty quick. It's during your weekend or your migration window, and launching is quick as well. So correspondingly, we will spend most of our time in the webinar today talking about the first three stages: assess, plan, and prep. With that, I'm going to turn that over to Cody, and he's going to talk to us about why you might consider migrating to cloud.
Yeah, so one of the biggest points is that the server end of life announcement, which was made a while back, is rapidly approaching. So Atlassian will discontinue support for server on February 14th of 2024. So that's obviously one of the biggest points. So we want to make sure that you have the necessary support for your products and have the security and safety that you need. With that, cloud is a much more feature-rich version of the server environment that you may be used to, or maybe even data center. So in cloud, David and I recently attended a migration kind of partner equip, which helped us learn more about Atlassian's future and some of the tools that they're providing to us to help improve the cloud and cloud migration experience. And in that, they really went into detail on the investments that are being made in the cloud. And we'll talk more about that throughout this entire webinar. But cloud is just very feature rich. That is where a lot of the detail, or excuse me, a lot of the effort is going into from Atlassian on improving and really trying to be a very functional product for your teams. So there's some really great features to talk about, and if you've seen a server version, you've pretty much seen what cloud looks like. The UI is a little bit more different, it's a little bit friendlier, and then there's a great link that we can provide, which is a roadmap to upcoming enhancements that are being made into, well, if I can get my link to work here, that are being made into the cloud environment. So right now there's some bigger pieces that are coming into it. And here you can see, various different improvements that are all being made into Jira Cloud. So if there's different, areas that you're interested in, maybe just do a quick search here. We'll look up HIPAA. You can see where Atlassian is on the process of getting, HIPAA compliance rolled into Jira Cloud. So great tool to look at. There's a ton of features available within cloud. And so please keep that in mind as you continue to look at your journey into the cloud environment. I'm going to flip this back over to David here for just a second, and we are going to talk about what you can migrate into cloud.
Sure. Thanks, Cody. When we're working with customers, companies that are migrating, one of their most common questions is, what can I migrate to cloud relative to, all of the Atlassian products that are out there? What can I migrate to cloud? What can I not migrate to cloud? So we have this slide here, and you can see there's just a variety of Atlassian products, both cloud-based and server-based. Some of these are actually deprecated already. Make a note of the items that are circled in green. Your Jira, your basic Jira soft products, Jira Software, Jira Core, uh, Service Desk, which is now called Service Management on Server, depending on how old what version of server you're running. If you've got an older version of server, it's Service Desk. If it's newer, it's Jira Service Management. And then there are Bitbucket and Confluence server products. For those items circled in green, there are corresponding cloud-based products. And all of those can be migrated directly. The items circled in blue, Crowd and Bamboo, those don't have cloud-based versions, but there are other cloud products that you can migrate to, or that fulfill the same role as those. So, for instance, Crowd on-premise, Crowd is your user management and your user directory product. If you go to Cloud and you want to use a similar product, outside of managing your users manually, there's the Atlassian Access product. So if it comes to Bamboo and you want to move that to a cloud-based product, the Bitbucket Pipelines product is becoming more robust, and it would serve to take the place of the functionality of Bamboo. With that, when you go to cloud, you have, or if when you migrate off of server, you have a couple of options. You can just go to cloud, or you can go to a data center instance. And Cody is going to talk to us about comparing those two options next.
Yeah. So there's some pretty significant differences to look at between a cloud and a data center product. So hopefully this will help kind of determine which maybe direction you want to go. The first is the global scale. So within cloud, there is the user count aspect of it, which, as you can see, per this slide was 35,000, and I believe that's supposed to be 50,000 by end of year.
I don't know when, but it's
Okay.
going to be raised to 50,000, for instance. So,
I could go back and check the roadmap there, but regardless, you can see there's a big investment in more users being allowed within a cloud instance. Also with that is you get unlimited instances on cloud. And some of this depends on what access tier that you're using. But within data center, you have a similar kind of ability. It's self-managed, so you can have unlimited users and instances. When it comes to reliability, Atlassian guarantees a 99.9 guaranteed uptime with their product. So with that on data center, that's something that you're managing. If you have a major issue, then that's something that your team would have to work through. If you're on cloud, then that's something that the Atlassian cloud engineers are working on. When it comes to security and compliance, this is another obviously big feature, something that we're all very focused on. On cloud, that is something that Atlassian, again, is managing for you. So they are looking for those vulnerabilities. They're making updates. They're taking good care of their cloud product for their clients. On data center, this is where, again, your team has the ability to manage that. When it comes to governance, there is certain governance controls built into Atlassian Cloud. That doesn't speak to necessarily that internally you may need to have some additional governance protocols in place, but that is something that gets helped with when you have Atlassian Cloud. On data center, this again comes down to your team. Depending on their strength and their skill set, they can manage that to the needs of the organization. On cloud, you're getting help from Atlassian. And then lastly, when it comes to apps and extensibility, there are a number of different cloud fortified apps available within cloud, and the ability to actually help create some apps all comes through cloud features. On data center, they do have data approved apps, and you can access different features through APIs on data center as well. So the apps is an ever growing marketplace that's available for cloud. I can tell you in my time working with Atlassian products, I've really not run into an issue where I couldn't find an app that's already produced out there to help for my particular need. And there are much more available within cloud than say data center. So a few things to think about as, again, you're looking to make that journey. I'm going to turn this over to David. The next big piece to kind of think about is your subscription level that you would want when you say move to cloud.
So we're still talking about your assessment phase, the questions and items that you're looking at, making decisions around before you embark on this journey. And one item is, as Cody mentioned, is your subscription level in cloud if you go to cloud. This is a little bit different because on server you don't have subscription levels. So let's just review this real quickly. Basically, fundamentally, when we're looking at your basic products like Jira Software, Service Management, and Confluence, you've got these 4 different subscription tiers. There's free, standard, premium, and enterprise. We're going to look at those a little closely here in a minute. But before we do that, I want to refer you to the bottom of the slide where we have an area here for Atlassian Access. Atlassian Access, like I mentioned before, is your user management product. If you're wanting to do single sign-on or you're wanting to do any kind of automated user provisioning, like I said before, this would be outside of. You don't have to have Atlassian Access. You could do this manually, but if you want to do some automation and you want single sign-on, you're going to want Atlassian Access. If you want to get Atlassian Access, and it's basically available it's an additional subscription if you're at the free, standard, or premium tiers. The thing to note here is if you happen to be at the enterprise tier for any of your products, you don't have to have a separate subscription for Atlassian because it's included. Okay, so with that, let's look at the different tiers here. Before I jump in, I just want to say, our purpose here with this slide is to sort of help you zero in or start thinking about and zero in on what your subscription would be. Just as a little bit of a help, I will tell you that 80% of the customers we work with land on some sort of premium tier product with Atlassian Access. That is just the vast majority. Another thing to note here is if you have multiple products, like say you have Jira Software and Confluence, or say you have all 3, you have Jira Software, Service Management, and Confluence. These individual products can be at different tiers. They don't have to all be the same tier. So you could have Jira Software at premium, and you could have Confluence at standard, or Jira Service Management at standard. You could have Jira, I could go through the permutations there, but they don't all have to be the same. Let's talk about just Jira Software. Standard is fairly limited. It's definitely a smaller percentage of our customers that we see use that. It's more limited in the number of automation executions. When you're in the cloud, you have automation for Jira, and in cloud, the executions that you have are counted. Standard is just more limited. We have on here 500 a month. That's actually been changed, and it's more than 500 a month now, but it's still fairly limited. So there are a variety of features in premium that tip most companies over the point from standard to premium. So let's talk about we'll talk about what those are. One of the big ones is advanced roadmaps. If you want to use advanced roadmaps, it's included in Premium Enterprise. It's not included in Standard. It's also not available as an add-on subscription. So if you want advanced roadmaps, you're going to have to be at Premium. Additionally, Premium and Enterprise, you get a sandbox instance, which can be, basically a cloned version of your production instance. For most companies out there operating without any kind of a sandbox is untenable. So that's something that pushes a lot of companies from standard to premium. Additionally, when it comes to automation for Jira, premium gives you the ability to have automations that run globally or across multiple projects, whereas you don't have that ability on standard. So a lot of companies want that. That pushes a lot of companies over to premium. And there's some other items listed there, but I just hit some of the big ones. Enterprise it's a smaller percentage. You're going to go to Enterprise if and when you need unlimited instances, or if you're a company it's not something that we saw so much of in the past, but we're starting to see more of it now. If you're a company that's in acquisition mode and you're acquiring other companies, it's common for um, companies to get an enterprise tier subscription so they can have a variety of different instances under their big, the umbrella of their single organization. So that's a lot to digest there. That's something that you're going to think about and make decisions about. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Cody now, and he's going to review with us a survey about cloud platform benefits.
Yeah, and I apologize. It looks like we may have lost our screen share for just a moment. I'm going to try resharing this 1 second. Perfect. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. So we conducted a survey. Excuse me, we didn't. Atlassian conducted a survey to look at some of the top benefits of cloud and gather some of their feedback from the respondents. So one of the first main points around this was that was highly reviewed was peace of mind around maintaining security and version upgrades. So as we talked about previously, that was a big response for this group, and in that, it kind of harps back to a couple of slides ago where we talked about Atlassian managing your security upgrades. With that, the next main point that really kind of stood out to these respondents was improved speed and accessibility. Again, Atlassian is managing all of this for you, and so that really stood out. Employee satisfaction is another major point. We're all trying to keep our employees satisfied with their daily activities and their daily tasks, and so with some of the improved speed and then performance down below here, you'll see that that does help as a benefit to your staff and help improve their satisfaction. As I kind of mentioned for a second, improved performance, it comes along with this. So again, when you're using a self-managed maybe data center or server instance, depending on the size of that instance, you may run into some performance issues with it being self-managed as opposed to Atlassian's management of it. And this may, speak a little bit to some of the more higher ups within your particular organization, but reduce total cost of ownership for Atlassian products. And we'll kind of come back to that here in a moment. But that's one thing that really obviously kind of speaks to any organization is a chance to save a little money. Improved security, again, kind of, goes in line with point number one there, where Atlassian is managing the security, the vulnerability of their global, their cloud product. And then these last two, increased capacity for teams to focus on strategic goals. Again, kind of goes back to maybe the improved employee satisfaction. So rather than maybe working with a clunky system, they've got more smooth workflow, and that's helping increase their capacity. And then lastly, better third-party apps and integrations. So in this case, we talked a few slides ago about the amount of apps, cloud fortified apps that are available within the cloud environment. And so with that, that allows you to easily integrate them within your system, use them regularly, and, kind of go back to a couple of these points above, which is it just helps make your system run that much smoother and be more effective for your team. So as I kind of alluded to with the total cost of ownership, David's going to talk about that in a little bit greater detail, and I'm going to pass him the mouse here in just a second. There we go. So let me get you that.
So when you're looking at an endeavor like this, naturally, one of the biggest topics on the table, if not the biggest topic, is the question of cost. And of course, your senior leadership are going to be interested in that. So you may be tasked with leading some of those conversations. But anyway, let's just walk through a little overview of how the costs compare of Atlassian cloud products versus an on-premise scenario. The blue items here on this slide represent your licensing and hosting and things that you just absolutely have to pay for regardless of which situation you're pursuing. And in this case, when it comes to cloud, the licensing is going to cost you more when you move to cloud. But it's important to be able to point out to senior leadership that the total cost of ownership is actually significantly less, because when you move to cloud, you're relieved of having to pay for and maintain the infrastructure, the hardware that runs all of that. You're relieved of having to, your paid staff having to spend their time and bandwidth doing software and hardware upgrades. You're relieved of having to implement security measures, and you're just relieved of a lot of everything that's involved with running and maintaining an on-premise data center, or even if you're paying for a data center in the cloud that you manage with administrators. You just have a lot of costs that you are relieved of when you move to the cloud. So, little fun fact here at the bottom that came out of this survey done by TechValidate is that after migrating from server to cloud, 36% of customers say their total cost of ownership went down. With that, we're going to go to the next slide. We're going to talk about just adjustments and challenges that you may experience when you go to the cloud. One item is marketplace apps. When you migrate, you have to concern yourself with what apps you are running on server, and you have to evaluate whether those apps are available in cloud. Some apps have cloud versions, some don't. If a cloud version doesn't exist, then you have to decide whether you want to just do without that app, or whether you want to find an alternative, or whether the cloud version of the product natively has that functionality in it anyway. We actually see that happen quite a lot. So that's part of your assessment process. Additionally, user and group management is different when you go to the cloud. When you go to the cloud, one thing that's different in cloud for your users, a valid email address is basically the primary key that uniquely identifies each user. So that's part of your process on your server, is to get all of that in order. We're going to talk about that a little bit more a little bit later, but that's a big step. That's a lot of work, because as you can imagine, in most server instances, not all users have, well, on server, users aren't required to have an email address at all. So that all has to be looked at. User interface differences. The user interface in cloud, it's 90% the same. It's about 10% different. What I say to people is, if you were looking over someone's shoulder from a distance and they were using Jira, you would be hard pressed to tell whether they're on cloud or server. But there are enough differences that we actually have a training class that some customers ask us to do with them and walk through them. It's about an hour, and we walk through some of the differences. But anyway, that's just something that can be a part of that you will experience when you go to cloud. By and large, I mean, the cloud UI is considered to be better, and I actually consider it to be better. It's more efficient. They've designed it to where you can get more things done with fewer clicks, things like that. When you migrate to cloud, you have your automations. Jira automation, your automation for Jira automations are not migrated with the migration tool. It's something that you have to do manually. You have to export them, and you have to import them, and then you have to sort of tweak each one of those to get those to work. So that's something to be aware of. Advanced roadmaps is available at the premium level and above. I mentioned that before. One thing about cloud is that it includes a product called Jira Work Management. You don't have that on server. What Atlassian did sort of is On server, you have the Jira Core product that has been retooled and made into something better and cooler in cloud, and it's Jira Work Management. I'm going to just give you a really quick preview of what Jira Work Management is all about. It's basically Jira Core with a lot of cool additional features. It has a basic task board. Jira Work Management projects can have a basic task board. It also has this list view, which is sort of like a spreadsheet view, which is really cool. A lot of people really like this. And you can actually edit values here, sort of within the cell. This is very similar to what a lot of users that may use the Monday.com product. You can also have a calendar view of the work within your project. There's also the timeline view. You can set up forms if you want to have custom forms for your team or other users to enter items into your project. Let's see what else here. Project pages, you can link directly to Confluence, but also in work management projects, there's a lot of what I would call turnkey templates that you can set up that have just a variety of different scenarios for different departments that allow you to just hit the ground running without having to do any configuration at all, really. And when I say templates, I think it almost does Atlassian injustice because it sounds like, oh yeah, just a bunch of templates. We know what templates are. They're useless. It's like Atlassian actually put a lot of time and effort and research into coming up with out of the box project configurations that are ready to go for companies out there. They did a lot of survey work. So that's just a quick review of Jira Work Management. It's really kind of a hot rodded Jira product that you just don't have in Jira Server. Another item here, and I believe this is the last one, is in cloud there are team managed projects. You don't have those on server. Team managed projects is something that's sort of like a self-serve model. If you want to enable this, actually it comes enabled by default, and we recommend that most customers turn this off because it is a self-serve model. If your users find it, they can just spin up a Jira project and just start using it. It's intended for, sort of throwaway ad hoc projects. It's not intended for mission critical work that needs to be managed by the larger organization. And the reason that we recommend that you turn this off is because, at least to start out with, is because users do find it and they spin these projects up and they start doing mission critical work in there. And it's just not tied into the greater instance in terms of reporting. It wasn't designed for that. It's also not, it's the management that you can do of that as a Jira administrator is limited. And also from the ground up, Atlassian didn't really build a migration path to go from team managed projects to company managed projects. And we get that request a lot. Customers reach out and they like, hey, we have these team managed projects. We need them to be company managed projects. And we actually have to migrate those. There's no way to convert those. And the migration path is not a smooth, easy one. It's very manual. So the reason we say to turn it off is because when you're migrating to cloud, you don't need a new curveball thrown in. When you want your transition to cloud to be as smooth as possible. You want it to be as much like your server experience. And so you just don't need that sort of unknown thrown in there at the beginning. If you do choose to turn on team managed projects, we recommend that you study that, you make that decision, and that you educate your users first and make sure that your users understand what team managed projects are, what they're for, and what they are not for. So you don't get yourself into that situation where users are using team managed projects for mission critical work. So that is all. Those are a variety of things that you will run into when you go to cloud. There's a lot of cool stuff there. Cloud really is a great product. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Cody. He's going to talk to us about the complexity of your migration and how that relates to how much time it takes.
Thank you, David. All right. So one of the big things to look at whenever you're kind of wrapping up this assess phase is what the complexity of your environment is. And so as you can see on the screen here, we have a simple graph that has complexity over time. And so you can see that in the lower left quadrant, your complexity is low, your time is low. So if you say have a low amount of data and a low amount of users, you're looking at generally a shorter, maybe a smoother migration path. When you move to the other kind of side of this, the direction the arrow is going, the arrow is going, you start layering in the size of your ecosystem, the number of apps that you're migrating, the number of essential integrations, the amount of time greatly increases. And so as we've been on this webinar, we've spent roughly half the time telling you just how big the assess phase is. And this is kind of the reason why, which is that the more and more that you add in, data and users and apps, the more complex it's going to get. And that leads to more planning, more testing, because our goal is to make sure that through a migration path that you're going to get the best possible outcome. And so it comes down to finding out, what modifications need to be made, what may or may not be making that migration journey, what we may have to do different as far as essential integrations on the cloud versus on a server or a data center instance. So hopefully that kind of helps paint the picture a little bit of what to expect with your product. So David kind of mentioned earlier, we've seen migrations go as little as maybe 2 months or 3, upwards of the 6, 8, maybe 10 or 12 month migration path. And when you get into those later ones, those longer migration paths, it's a significant amount of data. It's a significant amount of users. It's a large ecosystem or ecosystems now that we're seeing, and maybe a lot of apps and a lot of integrations. And so it just leads to a lot more work to make sure that we get that prepped appropriately. I do want to hit kind of a pause for just a moment and talk a little bit about us as a whole. I know we're talking about the migration services, that we offer as an Atlassian partner, but we do offer some other services as well. So with that, kind of similar to this webinar, we have the ability to provide training. So we have a number of different Atlassian consultants, solutions engineers throughout various areas of practice for Atlassian products. And so we can provide training both on-site or virtual for your teams. We offer consulting. This is a main piece of what David and I do on a regular basis, which is, again, as Atlassian partners, we can provide that consulting expertise to help you with maybe it's a cloud migration, could be a support agreement. We have other members in our office that could say help with advanced roadmaps or the other various products that Atlassian covers. We also provide custom development. We've got some really great information that we've been able to share with on YouTube about some of the custom developments that we've done for other organizations. And so, these can include add-ons, custom integrations, complete custom front ends for Atlassian products. This is another area that we can provide. And then lastly, we talked a little bit about licensing earlier, as far as the actual cost for your instance. That is something that we can help with. So we're able to get basically preferred pricing to be able to provide that maybe better than what you can get from Atlassian. So I do encourage you to reach out to our team if you are interested in any of these other areas, aside from maybe doing a migration or maybe a migration and then that leads into something else. I assure you we're able to help with that. So our next area that we are going to look at, I'm going to turn this back over to David to talk about user management.
Thanks, Cody. So as I alluded to before, when you go through this process, notice we're in the planning phase now. There's some things that you need to plan for in terms of user management. If you are going to use Atlassian Access, you need to identify what your cloud-based identity provider is going to be. You may have one already. If you have Active Directory on premise. It's not unusual for us to see those companies implementing Azure AD in the cloud. You don't have to use Azure AD. You can use anything. You might use Okta, but you have to have a cloud-based identity provider that you integrate with and configure to be integrated with Atlassian Access. So you need to plan that. You need to decide what that configuration is going to be. Additionally, in terms of doing the migration, like I mentioned before, all of your users in your server instance have to have unique email addresses. And as you can imagine, if you're running any kind of server product, you know that's when you look at your base of servers there, that's not the condition that it's in. It's typical for things to not be in order there. It's very common to have a lot of users that don't have an email address because server doesn't actually require it. It's common to have multiple users with the same email address. That all has to be fixed. Each user has to have a unique email address. And the reason that we say that this has to be fixed and that it is a big undertaking is because the migration tools that Atlassian provides, there's a migration tool for Jira and there's one for Confluence. Those tools actually run checks on your data and checks on a variety of things on your server instance before it runs. And if the user situation is not taken care of, down to 100% perfection, the migration tool just simply won't run. So it is a roadblock in terms of actually performing your migration. You can't skip over this step. So this is something that we spend quite a lot of time working with our customers on getting in order. Now, you don't necessarily have to provide and when we talk about users, we're talking about all of your historical users too. We're not talking about just your current users that are licensed, that are active. If you've had a Jira or Confluence instance that's been around for a few years, you've got a lot of users in the system that are no longer with your company and they're inactive users. Those all have to be uniquely identified in the cloud as well if you want to preserve that identity information. You don't necessarily have to do that, though. The migration tools, at least in terms of Jira, gives you some options for, say you have some users that have invalid email addresses or don't have an email address at all. The migration tool will allow you to select an option where those users are just migrated with sort of a generic label called former user. There's also an option in there for if there are some users in your system that share the same email address, like say you have a user who has a user account for their daily work, and then they have a separate user account for admin work, but it has the same email address. The migration tool can combine those into one account if you want to do that. Some situations you may want to do that. Some situations you may not. You may have numerous service accounts all sharing an email address. It may be okay to combine those. It may not be. It just depends on your situation. So it's sort of a case-by-case review process. So that's what we're talking about when it comes to user management and planning as you're migrating to cloud. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Cody. He's going to talk to you a little bit about how we track work as we do migrations and how we would recommend that you track your work if you do a migration on your own.
Yeah. So one of the big tools that we use is actually the tool everyone's used to. So we will spin up, and especially some of this depends on the size of your instance, but we'll generally spin up an instance just to track the work that we will share between us as a partner and your organization. And through that, we'll use Confluence, and through that we use a variety. We have a template that we will upload that gives us a lot of the tools we need, from, as we're kind of presenting here, app assessments to run books to discovery information. Whatever we need to document on your instance, we'll log that in Confluence. And then we'll tie that in as appropriate with, a Kanban board. And with that, we will track the various pieces of work that need to be performed on, both sides of the table. And this gives us a lot of visibility, gives both sides a lot of visibility into the work that needs to be done, its progress, and what still may need to be done, corrected, assessed, whatever it may be. So we like to use our tools, and they work great, and we like to use those again for when we're coordinating with clients. So this is a big piece of our collaboration that we will use when we're working with the client. So I'm going to move to the next slide, which is going to talk a little bit about communication and server prep. So at this stage, this is where we want to begin talking about your migration with your organization. So we've got different communication plans, kind of boilerplate stuff that's available, but it's a good step to start letting your team in on what is going to be happening, what to expect, and what may be changing. There may be some, obviously there's some UI differences, but there may be some other data changes that may need to be reviewed. Aside from communication with your team, this is also a big step to start reviewing, what your servers look like. So we need to make sure we have an appropriate version that is migratable to cloud. Want to make sure that we clean up as much as we can on the server. This is where we'll start integrating some pre-migration checklists and reviewing the cloud versions of what you're looking to bring over. So that way we can make sure that we've got a good plan in place from the end of almost the end of life on server to getting over to the cloud. So David's going to talk a little bit more on another big step that we have, and this is a major piece to any migration, which is about the runbook and the timeline. So David.
Sure. Thanks, Cody. This is what we do when we do migrations for our customers, and that we recommend that you do as well. You absolutely have to have a run book. You're going to create the run book, and in so doing, you'll also create your timeline. When it comes to the run book, you need to have basically a run book that has every single step. It's basically a lot of line items from beginning to end. Every single step that you take to execute that migration in order, with all of the information that you need to execute that step, and links to any information that you may need in order to do that. When we create run books, I think it's kind of my personal standard. I'd like to tell people, when our teams, when we're making run books, that we need to make the run book, it needs to be complete and thorough and understandable enough so that if somebody else had to step into your shoes and run that for you, they could execute all the steps based on what is contained in the run book without having to go chase somebody else down and ask them a bunch of questions. So you want that to be very detailed, very complete, very thorough, very easy to understand. After you've created this run book, you'll sort of test the run book as you do your test migrations, and will start timing things and making note of how long each step takes to run or accomplish. So, and that helps you form your timeline for when you do your production migration. When you do your production migration, it's very important that you have an idea of how long it's going to take. You're going to have a migration window. It's either going to be an evening during the week, or a couple of days during the week, or it's going to be over a weekend, depending on whenever you decide to do it. You need to have an idea of just how long those steps are going to take, and when you're going to arrive to the point of your user acceptance team being ready to do the user acceptance testing, so you can make your go, no-go decision when you're doing your production migration. So those are two key things that you need to develop and build out to have ready, is your run book and your timeline. Next slide is on the next slide, Cody is going to talk to us about test migrations.
Yeah. So test migrations, as David kind of alluded to in the previous slide with the run book, our goal here is to quite literally test and test again, and probably test one more time, to make sure that we have a stable, successful migration path. The other key thing that we're looking for is predictable. We want to make sure that we document everything that we need to in the run book, And that way we can start repeatedly coming up with, regular results. And that will help us be fully prepared for your migration. It's kind of hard to overstate the importance of this step. We'll do a number of different tests at this stage. It could come down to just a particular app. It could come down to users, could come down to your actual data on in your Jira or your Confluence environment, maybe whatever it is we're looking to migrate. But this is one of the biggest pieces that we'll spend, a fair amount of time on. We spend a lot of time assessing, and we're doing repeated testing as a result of that. So next up, we want to talk about user acceptance testing. So that's we've tested your environment. We've got a good stable path. And now David's going to talk to us about how that looks to your users.
Sure. Thanks, Cody. So we touched on this briefly, but user acceptance testing is something that is a critical required part of this process. You're going to do it when you do your test migrations, and you're also going to do it, excuse me, when you do your production migration. So in order to do this, you basically select your UAT testing group, and you're going to select from key managers, stakeholders, and key users. You're going to have them test common day-to-day tasks, and let's just talk quickly about some of the main things that they need to be testing when you do a migration. As we all know, workflows are the heartbeat of Jira. You need to, each team, you need to have representatives from each team testing the workflows to make sure that they work. When standard native functionality, workflow functionality migrates, it migrates with, pretty much 100% success, successfully 100% of the time. But when there are a lot of add-ons that are workflow extensions, so you've got your JMWE, JSU, Script Runner, those things, and almost every customer is using one or more of those. So all of those workflow extensions, that functionality that you've built into your system needs to be tested. You also need to take a look at your boards and filters. Boards and filters come across. Sometimes they all come across, sometimes they don't. You need to have each team looking at the boards and filters that they use. And so that's the main thing is, your workflows and your boards and filters, and just, your common day-to-day tasks. So like I said, you'll be doing that during testing, and you'll definitely be doing that during your production migration window. During that window, that is going to be what is going to allow you to make your go, no-go decision. So we're going to go ahead and move to the next slide. We're going to talk about the actual migration. So in order to migrate, after you've collected all of the information that you have, up to this point, you've done your planning, you're assessing, you planned, you've prepared, you've tested. What's involved with this is you pick the date, whether it's a weekend, you put it on the calendar, you make Atlassian aware that you're migrating, and make them aware of the date. They want to know. Depending on the scope and the size of your migration, you may be eligible for weekend support, or you may not be. But you arrange for that support. You get that on Atlassian's calendar. You communicate it to your organization. You resolve any last-minute issues, and when the day and time comes, you execute the run book that you've hopefully executed 2 or 3 or 4 times up to this point. At that point, you're going to, you get to that sort of cutoff time before you execute your migration. You're going to prepare your server. You're going to do whatever it is you've decided to do at that point, whether it's set the server to read-only by implementing a read-only permission scheme on your projects, or limiting access, or whatever it is you do to sort of get people to stop using server. So you do that, and then you execute your run book. After that, if all goes well, then you actually launch, and Cody is going to talk about that to us next.
And here's the exciting part. So at this point, you've had a chance to migrate. We want, a few key individuals, probably the same people that did your UAT testing, to hop in and take a look at the instance, make sure everything looks good. From there, we will schedule a go, no-go decision. And generally, I've always seen this go as a go. At that point, it's exciting. You're moving to the cloud. You've got communications that's going out to your teams. They know where to log in on Monday or the next following day, and they're ready to begin working on cloud. From there, if for whatever reason there had to be a rollback, we would obviously talk through those steps. But this is generally a point for celebration. This is the big moment that everyone's been waiting for whatever length of time that the migration has been going on for month to months to maybe a year even. So this is always a great time to take a step back and just monitor, see what kind of issues may pop out of go live. And then just reflect and celebrate with your team. This has been a big journey. It's taken a lot of effort, on everybody's side to help make this happen. And so it's just a big moment to celebrate that you've moved to cloud and your team's hard work and, begin on your new journey. So with that, we are pretty much right on time. I think we've got just a handful of slides. So I'm going to turn it over to David. We'll see if we have any Q&A.
So if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A chat now. If you have any questions about anything we've covered today, anything that we've left out, if there's anything you have questions about anything that we didn't cover today, we'd love to answer your questions. Additionally, as we move to the next slide, both Cody and my email addresses are going to be there. So you're welcome to reach out to us with questions via email after the fact as well. Okay. We have one question here. Let's see. Okay. Thank you, Fitz. I'm not understanding your first sentence. Are you asking about Confluence? But you're asking, can a first migration be done and a Delta only after? So both with Jira and Confluence, actually, no. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much a straightforward no. What we do is that would be great. That would make migrations a lot simpler and a lot shorter. But no, what we do is we do test migrations to test instances in the cloud, or if the customer is at premium or better, we'll do a test migration to their sandbox and let them do UAT in the sandbox. And then we leave their actual production instance empty and blank for the production migration. But the way Atlassian's migration tools are set up to work, it's just an all complete migration. There's no migrate a little bit first and then deltas later, but that would be great.
We didn't discuss it necessarily during this webinar, and we go into a little more detail in our workshop, just a different interpretation of the question. You can do what's known as a phased approach to migrating, where you migrate, say you have 1,000 spaces in your Confluence and the decision's made to migrate 500, on this date, and then we're going to migrate the next 500 on another date. Fitz, I don't know if that fits in your question there, but so you can do, a phased migration approach. I do say that a little cautiously. Generally going the full approach is the preferred way, migrating all your projects. If you're talking about Jira, or all your Confluence spaces, if you're talking about Confluence, it just overall makes things cleaner on the cloud end when you're done. So just something to consider there.
Yeah, to get it over with in one shot if you can.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like we don't have any other questions. We can go ahead and move to the last and final slide.
So we'll wrap up from here. So thank you all for attending. We really appreciate your time today and taking a moment to look at us. We're an Atlassian Solutions partner that we're here to be able to help with migrations, and not only migrations, we offer a number of different webinars and classes. I talked about this a little bit earlier in the webinar. Please take a moment to take note of our emails. If you have any questions that you didn't think of or didn't want to ask during this, you can email David or I anytime after this, really. And then through this hyperlink here, this xpm.com/training, XPM is we've merged with Valiantus, so now we're Valiantus, but xpm.com/training is where we keep our training event calendar. So from here, you can sign up for a variety of different events that will be happening through the next year. Look for a more updated version of that online. And we really hope to see you again at maybe our migration workshop in February, or a number of these other great events that we have. If you're looking to migrate, we've got Jira boot camps or Confluence boot camps that can be great training for your team for the post-migration side. So without further ado, we will wrap up right on time. And we hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day. Reach out to us if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.